Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host for this week, Sarah Howell, and I'm thrilled to be talking with a couple of my colleagues about their awesome programming that directly impacts students and educators across the state. You'll hear them talk about building relationships and taking small but critical steps to meet the complex social emotional needs of students. You'll also hear them talk about ACEs, and this is shorthand for adverse childhood experiences that show up all the time in different ways across our schools, but perhaps not in the ways you might expect. So, today we are joined by experts in this field, two guests from the North Carolina Center for Resilience and Learning, as well as a principal from one of their partner schools in Wilson County. And together we'll explore what it means to cultivate trauma-informed learning and working environments. Joining us today, we've got Elizabeth DeConti, the Senior Director of the North Carolina Center for Resilience and Learning, Yolanda Thorne, Program Manager for the North Carolina Center for Resilience and Learning, and Brittany Dublin, the Principal of Vincent Bynum Elementary School. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having us.
Sure. And we're going to jump right in. I wonder, Elizabeth, if we might start with you, if you could please tell us a little bit about the Center for Resilience and Learning and what y'all do.
Sure. So, our center is one of the centers of practice housed at the Public School Forum of North Carolina. And we began in 2017, 2018, and have continued to grow over the past 9 years, partnering with districts and schools across the state around leading trauma-informed learning environments for both staff and students. And so when we partner with our primary coaching model with schools, we commit to them for 2 full years. And we start by providing some all staff training around trauma, adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress, how the brain works with the stress response system, and then starting to introduce resilience and resilience building practices for staff and students to consider implementing within their building to create that safer and more supportive learning environment. And then after our initial staff training, we partner with the principal to create what we usually call a resilience team within that school, a steering committee made up of teachers and school leaders that really takes that next step beyond training and awareness and works with our resilience coach in that school to begin a needs assessment and asset mapping process to set goals and eventually create an action plan of trauma-informed strategies and changes that they want to implement and put in place. And we work with our evaluation partner at Duke to evaluate outcomes as well. But it's really meant to be a partnership with that school. As you can imagine, each school looks different in terms of the goals that they want to set, the needs that they have, and what strategies they want to implement and focus on.
Awesome. So, building on that, talking about outcomes, you've talked a lot about the training and the team building that you do. Could you talk a little bit about the impact, Elizabeth, of having a trauma-informed learning environment for students?
Sure. So the areas of resilience that we really focus on with both our training and our coaching process, we have 4 areas. So first is around staff resilience and well-being, just recognizing the importance of supporting our educators. We know day in and day out, their jobs are extremely hard and can be really challenging. And so it's just as important to focus on their resilience and well-being as it is for our students. So we start with the adults in the building. The second area is safe and supportive relationships. We want every student to come into a school building and feel that sense of belonging and connection. We know that's one of the first ways for students to feel safe when they're in a space, and to enter into a space and be ready to learn when they're in an environment with adults that they feel supported by and encouraged with and connected to. The third area is around a structured and routine environment. So having structures, having clear expectations and routines in place that make the environment consistent and predictable. And then the last area is how we proactively teach and model self-regulation and social emotional learning skills for students as well. And ultimately, we want our schools to be this safe and supportive learning environment where kids, knowing that many students come into the school building each day having experienced something stressful at home, something stressful on on the bus. And we want them to come into a school environment where they feel like they have adults who are their champions and have their back. They feel that connection to the community. And then they are able to engage in and practice and learn regulation skills that when they are dysregulated or that stress response system is activated in their brains and that thinking part of their brain is maybe offline, they're able to regulate that and get that back online to be in a space ready to learn and take in new information and meet the expectations that we have for them in school.
Awesome. And Yolanda, you are on the ground doing this work in the schools. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what your work in the schools looks like within this model.
Yeah, so implementing our full coaching model is how we spend the majority of the time in our schools. And our coaching model is what we call a whole school, whole child framework that obviously looks different depending on which coach it is on any given day or what school. But it looks like facilitating our part one and part two of our introductory training, which talks about the trauma, stress response system, the impact of the ACEs and how it affects learning and behavior. We also touch on, as Elizabeth mentioned, self-care and collective care. And probably one of the most important pieces is actually implementation of the trauma-informed strategies. We talk about structure, routine, expectation, and disciplines in classrooms, and really emphasizing to teachers the importance of relationship building and connecting with students. And I guess I would say we also do resilience team meetings, and these are monthly at the minimum. They could, if a school can accommodate more than once a month, that's great. But at least monthly resilience team meetings. This is a team of educators who we prefer volunteer. They feel called to this work to be champions of this work, so they volunteer. We also do a needs assessment, which is super, super important to assess the actual need of the school so that we can determine what school-wide trauma-informed strategy we will implement. And then finally, it looks like doing what we call climate and culture walks. And with this, we're literally just walking through the building, gauging the climate, gauging the culture, which helps. One thing it helps is build relationships with the staff, and it gives us a better understanding of how to really meet the need of the school.
Yeah, kind of a lot. No kidding. But it sounds like you really build this program around the specific needs of your schools and your educators, and their students. So I wonder too what the impact of having a trauma-informed school looks like for the educators.
Oh, yeah, the impact is huge. So, our work literally transforms school communities. Our partner schools undergo really what we refer to as like a fundamental culture shift, in which they move away from punitive discipline to prioritizing relationships and safety and structure and deep connection with students. They also learn to reframe student behavior from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. So educators, they equip students with essential self-regulation skills, SEL skills, and we use and have quantitative data to help us tell part of the story, but this data doesn't capture the whole picture. So although we carefully track outcomes, we don't lose sight of the real human stories behind the data. So numbers show the progress and stories show the transformation. That's the impact.
Awesome. Um, Yolanda referred to some major culture shifts that they see happening at the schools. And Brittany, we know that as the principal, you really lead the way with a lot of this work. So I wonder if you could talk about why partnering with the center was such a priority for Vincent Bynum.
Sure. So we were not the first cohort in Wilson County, so we heard about the initiative and the partnership. And I reached out to one of our central services supports, and I just wanted to really know, like, what else could we get in our building to help our students? They bring so much trauma in the doors daily, and they often don't have the strategies to cope with what they are experiencing outside. So once I reached out, that kind of opened the door to us being looked at as the next cohort. And so it was exciting for us because we were having these conversations about trauma. We were having conversations about, let's dig deeper into the student. When you're experiencing behavior, there's usually a trigger or there is something underlying that is causing this behavior. So having this partnership has really made us what I would say aware of what we also bring in the doors every day. It's not just our children experiencing the trauma. We all have our own challenging things that are happening outside of our doors. So it was about finding ways to make sure that we are supporting the whole child as well as making sure that we are taking care of ourselves as well.
After the break, we'll continue our conversation with the Center for Resilience and Learning and Wilson County Principal Brittany Dublin. Welcome back. Let's hop right back into our conversation with the North Carolina Center for Resilience and Learning and Wilson County Principal Brittany Dublin. Brittany, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about any differences you've seen in your school community since introducing the trauma-informed practices.
Absolutely, I would love to. So we do have our resilience team meetings that we talked about earlier that Yolanda mentioned. And so after we did our needs assessment, we identified that we wanted to really focus on morning meetings. Morning meetings was something that we had been talking about. There was time already built into our schedule. We just didn't feel like it was being done to fidelity, and we weren't sure that we were really making it as impactful as it could be. So with morning meetings, our students all participate, they all provide a greeting, they get to share, and it's really about building relationships. So that is one thing that we have really focused on, and you can tell the relationships between students have changed, the relationships between staff and students has really changed, and it's just building that community, and it's very obvious within our building. In addition to that, that is our focus area, but because we're talking about strategies and we're talking about resilience, we've also been able to implement other smaller initiatives. So every morning on the morning announcements, I hold a mindfulness moment. And that's just a moment where we stop and we either practice breathing, or like this week is our do nothing moment, where we just remind the students that we're going to decompress from whatever you came in with. We're just going to sit here, we're going to do nothing, and we're going to recenter. And what's been great about that is we don't just use that with the students. When we get into a staff meeting, we have a mindfulness moment. When we go to start our PLCs and we know that we need to recenter, we're also applying that as staff as well. And you can see a huge difference with us as well, and being more mindful of how we interact with our students.
Absolutely. And I can speak from experience that I get to have those mindfulness moments led by this amazing team from Resilience and Learning at our own work. And these do nothing moments are pretty important. Um, we're looking a lot at one specific school, but I also would love to zoom out a little bit. And Elizabeth, does the center's work look the same in all of your partner schools? And could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So some of the core components of our model, where we start with the all staff training and then we work with each school, like we've mentioned, to build that resilience team. And then those schools have a coach like Yolanda who's partnered with them for those 2 full years. Those core components are the same and what we strive for at each school. And we also follow a very similar framework and process that Yolanda has mentioned too, with the needs assessment and asset mapping and action planning components. But what goals each team or each school sets, and what strategies that they want to put into their action plan, that's where it starts to look different. So like Brittany mentioned, they selected morning meetings as one of their first strategies, but each school is often going to have different strategies that they want to select based on what they see as their needs, what they think is going to work best in their own school community, and what their staff are going to really embrace. And I think that's one of the beauties of our model is we really want to empower these teams, though we have a coach coming in who's facilitating the meetings and leading the process and bringing research and resources. We really want each team to be the one to select their goals and their strategies. They know their school community, their students, families better than we do. And so we want them to be the ones to select the things that they really are excited about implementing in their school.
And Yolanda, when you begin working with a new school, what tends to surprise people the most about your work?
Maybe I think the fact that we don't come into a school and tell them what to do, nor do we do the work for them. Maybe teachers are used to someone from the district coming and saying, "This is what you're doing wrong. This is what I need you to fix," and we don't do that. Our needs assessment is literally designed to hear the educators and the administrators' voices so that we can indeed meet their need rather than having our own agenda. So the fact that we take partnership seriously, that we are truly partners in education. We're partners in the work and we're not dictators of this work, I think surprises educators. And maybe another thing that surprises them is how they come into the work thinking they're going to learn something to fix the kids. And resilience and learning provides strategies of support for students, for all students and educators, but even more, it surprises them that the work begins with them. Like educators end up having this mind shift first, that the work truly begins with them. And I think that surprises them that the work begins with you, not you fixing the kiddos.
Absolutely. I imagine that can be a tricky conversation to navigate sometimes too, and you do it with grace.
Yes.
Brittany, this is a lot of work that goes on in this school. The kids are with you in your building for, 6 years maybe. What skills do you hope that students carry with them beyond Vincent Bynum?
So, trauma doesn't stop in elementary school. It continues. As a former middle school teacher, I experienced that firsthand. So, my hope is that when we're teaching them the strategies, whether it's through morning meeting or through conversations or through mentoring, because those are all areas that we're focusing on, that they understand in a difficult moment, it's okay to take a step back and apply a strategy. And our hope is that they'll carry it not only through school, but out into, the community, out with their families. Times are always going to be tough throughout their life. And we just want to make sure that what we are giving them is a strategy that will help them be successful anywhere they are.
To close, I wonder if you each might talk a little bit about advice. What advice might you give to an educator who's interested in implementing social emotional learning or trauma-informed learning in their classrooms, but they're not sure where to begin? Elizabeth, let's start with you.
Sure. I would say, I think my first bit of advice would be just to come open, an open heart and open mind to the process, and to learning. Like Yolanda said, so much of this work begins with the educators and the adults in the building and that mindset shift, and really wanting them to understand the power and importance of them also thinking about their own resilience. We know just as much as students come into the buildings bringing heavy loads many days that many of our educators are as well. And so really just coming with that open heart and open mind to thinking about this, as what can they do to start to shift their own mindset or their own small daily practices. And the second piece I think would be that sometimes small shifts can lead to big change. Yolanda mentioned this too, and this ties into the whole strategy that Brittany mentioned with morning meetings, the power of creating connection and relationships. Oftentimes we don't think of how, greeting a student by name, giving them a smile or a warm hug when they come into the building, the impact that that can have on that student's day or their entire week. And so, encouraging educators, I think, to think about what is one small thing that may only take me 2 minutes out of my day to try and to do, even with a couple of students, whether it's building relationships, whether it's finding time just to intentionally connect or greet them. But those small shifts and making that commitment to those small daily practices can really have a big lasting change.
Starting small. That sounds like great advice. Brittany, what would you add to that?
I would add that, and it goes exactly in align with what Elizabeth said, is it's not one more initiative. It's not one more thing that you have to do. It is taking the time to build those relationships with your students and truly understand what they are bringing to your classroom and making sure that you are providing them all the strategies you can to be successful. One of my favorite quotes talks about before you can educate a student, you have to educate their heart. And so, as administrators and as teachers, we often get caught thinking about, well, how is this going to help us with test scores? How is this going to, build our students? But I can say just in the 3 years that I've been here and this, us implementing this, we've seen a decrease in behavior referrals and we've seen an increase in our educational performance. So it's not just one more thing to do or one more thing on our plates. It's just a small shift that will continue to help with the other pieces that are important as well.
Yeah, that's huge. Yolanda, what advice do you have?
So it's amazing how similar our answers are, I guess, because we all do this work together and collectively, and we believe in it so much. So I can summarize everything. I was literally going to say the same thing. Begin with self-examination and self-discovery. Like, what shifts can you begin to make first? Because those small shifts really do make a huge difference. Small, consistent actions. But I would say specifically that focus on connection and relationship because relationship and connection is like the foundation of this work. So even as seemingly as greeting students at the door, saying good morning, like having a routine, those small shifts really do make a huge difference.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all for the tremendous work you're doing. It's clear that you are passionate and dedicated to the kids that you serve, and we're lucky to have you out in our schools. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for
Thank
having us.
you.
After the break, this week's final word. The North Carolina Center for Resilience and Learning was founded on a simple but urgent truth. Children cannot learn effectively when they don't feel safe, whether that be physically, emotionally, or psychologically. Rooted in decades of neuroscience and educational research, the center works alongside schools to implement trauma-informed practices that support both students and the educators working in our local public schools. Research on adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, shows that exposure to trauma such as chronic stress, housing instability, neglect, or violence can significantly impact brain development and long-term health outcomes. In schools, trauma might show up as difficulty concentrating, heightened reactivity, withdrawal, inconsistent attendance, or a host of other problems that would likely be considered behavioral otherwise. These responses are often interpreted as defiance or disengagement. However, trauma-informed schools shift that question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you and how can we help? That shift changes everything, and it's essential to the center's work. Adaptability is another essential. The center's work is not one size fits all. Schools that work with the center are called partner schools, not participating schools, because they play a major role in shaping their own trauma-informed spaces. From helping coaches assess a school's culture and needs, to taking part in trainings on trauma-responsive strategies and building systems that implement those strategies, educators play a major role in making the center's work fit their school. And for students, the impact is profound. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, trauma-informed approaches improve students' emotional regulation, increase engagement, and reduce disciplinary incidents. Small but consistent shifts, like greeting students every day by name, building predictable routines, explicitly teaching coping skills, or responding to behavior with curiosity rather than punishment, can offer students lacking stability and emotional attunement the safe space they need to focus on academic achievement. And because our schools are both learning and working environments, the center also aims to have a positive impact on educators. This is especially important as burnout among teachers continues to be a serious issue. Research shows that when teachers feel supported, trained, and connected, retention improves and school climate strengthens. While systemic changes are necessary to fully address teacher burnout, small changes implemented by the center partner schools, like formally creating in-school support networks and decompression spaces for educators, have made a huge difference. Over time, those shifts benefiting students and educators create cultural transformation, and that is a huge deal. And it's not just an idealized or abstract concept. Creating and nurturing these safe spaces in our schools is a research-backed, equity-centered strategy for student success. During the 2024-25 school year, 22 districts and 43 schools in North Carolina received training or coaching from the center, impacting over 5,000 educators and 17,500 students. One partner school reported a 57% decrease in discipline referrals, and another reported a 63% decrease in suspensions after implementing trauma-informed strategies. Thanks so much for taking the time to learn and think about education with us. That's it for today, and we'll see you next week.